last year to decrease the total allowable cuts, the cod TAC, by 1/3. This was not, and I repeat not, because of any collapse of the Icelandic cod stock. The stock had, however, decreased. Recruitment was not sufficiently good, and neither the size of the stock nor the spawning stock was acceptable. Fortunately, we had various options, and were not in a position of being forced to do anything at the moment. We could, for example, have postponed addressing the problem without placing the cod stock in major jeopardy immediately. This would have, however, weakened the stock, and eventually we would have, of course, never have been able to refrain from taking measures in the end. Problems regarding resource utilization do not vanish into the thin air just by people trying to ignore them. As a responsible nation, we surely had to strengthen the cod stock, this being our most important fish stock, in order to render it able to continue being a pillar in the Icelandic economy. This is why we chose to do the sensible thing to strengthen the cod stock again, namely expand it in order to generate the best possible yield and also to facilitate fisheries from the stock at a minimum cost. The short-term impact will, however, be negative and will unavoidably affect some more than others. As a nation, we try to shoulder this responsibility and attempt to even out the burden, even though this is clear to us that those who will be hit the hardest by such measures are those who had the most interest to protect regarding the fisheries and processing of cod. I have frequently been asked whether this was not a hard decision to take. There is a very simple answer to this. Yes, this was indeed a very difficult decision. The consequences, for example, affected the most the areas that I represent as a parliamentarian. I was born and raised in a fishing village that bases its entire livelihood on cod fisheries. I used to work in the fishing industry just as my family did. I have worked in close proximity with people who totally rely on their income from the utilization of this fish stock, the cod. The impact was therefore very clear to me. But then again, this clearly illustrates how seriously we take our role as a responsible nation. The fact that I, in my capacity as a Minister of Fisheries, deriving from an area which I've just described, was prepared to enter into this kind of decisions illustrates more than many words our position towards the idea of responsible, sustainable fisheries. This decision was furthermore much disputed for many reasons. There are those who question the scientific grounds, of course, and those who felt that we should take things more slowly. Of course, these are matters that will always be disputed. One thing is clear, however, namely that when such a decision is made, the main thing is having identified and knowing the goal and how to realize it. We all know how easy it is to get lost on the track. We all know how simple it is for those who focus on the short term to just take the easy and comfortable path. Such a path, however, is not one that yields good results, although it may be popular for the time being. The main thing is that if one does not set the course straight, right from the beginning, one is faced with the risk of being blown off course in the turmoil of the political winds and hardly make any progress at all. Demagoguery is not what we need when setting the course in an important matter. A politician who has received the trust of the nation in public elections and been given the extensive mandate must, of course, focus on the long-term strategies and must base his or her decisions on clear ideology and ethics. In this respect, of course, it is essential for the views on sustainable utilization and long-term focus being acknowledged in the society. Realizing when such a situation emerges may be difficult. However, the prerequisite for this is a debate with the participation of many people. I believe that the discussions that have taken place in Iceland on the utilization of the marine resources and on how short term has passed since Iceland obtained full sovereignty over its economic zone, contributed to increasing the nation's understanding for the importance of safeguarding and carefully managing the natural resources of the ocean. Furthermore, it is significant how we have strengthened our economy and society and built more foundations. This is why we as a nation have been able to better tackle the short-term difficulties resulting from the cuts and the total allowable catch. This does not, however, change the fact that the fishing industry is, as before, the very great pillar of the Icelandic economy. We see this clearly now when storms, so to speak, are sweeping across the financial markets of the world. We recognize that the organization of our fishing industry should be perceived as a solid industry to which major demands for yields are made, and that the fishing industry is looked upon as any other field of work, a modern-day industry wherever in the world. Unfortunately, there are too many people who do not regard the fishing industry in this manner. They believe that the fishing industry may hold a social and rural development role only, and should therefore not be subject to the rules of the market. Such a thinking entails two things. One, sentencing those working in the fishing industry to lifelong poverty. And two, the risk has, as has frequently materialized, that the demands made become less and less, thereby people treat the resource worse than before. This is why I believe that the fishing industry should be given the opportunity it needs for economizing and responding, thereby rendering it possible for it to be able to engage in an international competition. We, as a fishing nation, have no other choice, no other alternative. If we do not succeed in maintaining the fishing industry as a solid and prosperous industry that generate good living standards, the living standards in Iceland will deteriorate, at least when compared to other nations. It is worth noting that we have succeeded in organizing the fishing industry in a manner that has made it the main driving force in improving the living conditions and the living standards in Iceland over the last decades. This should not be taken for granted. The fishing industry in too many countries is deemed as being a second-rate industry that does not compete with other industries, neither for capital nor manpower. One of the adventures during the last decades in Iceland is that the living conditions improved rapidly, not least as a result of the input of the fishing industry. One thing is clear, namely that if the fishing industry had been a burden, the living conditions in Iceland would not have improved as rapidly and steadily as it did. This is how important the fishing industry is for the national economy of Iceland.